So, I've had quite the education.
He's the person who replaced Michael Terry. We need to meet with him soon.
How are you?
We were on a group, and I was before I was there. We were on a group.
Where are all those empty seats over there?
Withdraw from this because okay. I don't know if he'll be here or not, but
no, he's resigned.
Okay.
Hey, you two scallywags. How are you? Yes, we are. How are you, young man? You've joined my club. I can't remember anything after about 10 minutes.
I can't read it. No, we're good.
Yeah, I'd actually like to hear how that conversation went. So.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Yeah, they are. Thank you, everybody. As always, that was a pretty full agenda. I believe that we also have quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and have Jeff do a roll call.
Okay. Aaron Sandine.
Here.
Michael Bernstein. Robert Burns. Terry Drew. Jody Filardo. Floyd Rorich.
Here.
Mark Masterson. Mike Keeling.
Here.
Tom McLeod.
Here.
Kenneth McMahon.
Present on the phone.
Michelle Noren. Alan Pitt. Alan will be here later. Leroy Shingatewa. Hyman Sukinik.
Here.
Craig Sullivan.
Here.
Rod Stevens.
Here.
Steve Metz. Damon Wood. Emerson Yearwood.
Here.
And Stephen Zilstra.
Here. Excellent. Thank you very much, Jeff. First, I just want to announce that Bob Burns has, because of a recent election, has also resigned from our commission due to a potential conflict of interest. So we've received his resignation, and we're talking about weeks. We haven't had this yet, so we're talking about what is the process for identifying someone new for that position. The first thing on the agenda is a presentation from Michelle. Michelle was called to present at the Board of Regents today, so I'm going to just give just a quick update. There's been some work on incorporating feedback from the community on the strategic plan. Haven't necessarily finalized that feedback. I've asked the team to set up some working group sessions to go through that feedback, make sure that we've captured everything, and talk about some next potential steps with that. So those meetings are being scheduled right now. that's really it on the strategic plan side. I did want to just mention, I don't know how many of you have reviewed the governor's budget. There's an interesting aspect of the governor's budget that I don't know if everybody noticed, but the governor requested and asked for a significant amount of funding going to the School Facilities Board to implement computer and network equipment. And that was kind of a result of some of the conversations we've had from this commission. So recognizing that there are challenges in the education community, and how do we address those technology issues? And this was one of the different ideas that has come up from that. And so please take a look at that. There's a lot going into that. The School Facilities Board will be facilitating that. I don't want to be misquoted, but I think it's almost $20 million that was in the ask. So we'll see how that plays out through legislative session this year. So next on the agenda, I'm going to have Galen get up and introduce our speaker.
I've been told that you have a more extensive report in your packet, some of you, but it is a pleasure today for me to do this. Jane and I have known each other for 6 or 7 years now, and she has been an inspiration to me. And we're of different political parties, and we're best friends, and it just shows that...
Third mic up there. I don't know if that's already ready again.
I'll use this.
You need to turn it on. This clip, turn it on. Sounds like it was on. Sounds like it's on.
On the very top technology stuff.
There it is. My eyes are not working.
There you go. All right, you got to start.
Okay. Somebody said something about pixie dust. That's what Jane provides to everybody so they can be more successful. I have an office full of pixie dust now. I hope that it rubs off and I breathe it for the next few weeks, and I'm much more successful. Jane is a fellow broadband advocate in the United States. She and I are different political parties, and we enjoy discussing that. She also is probably as like-minded as I am on anything with regard to broadband. And her passion is infectious. She told me quickly that her career has been basically 1/3 in higher education, 1/3 in the private sector, and 1/3 in public service. She's been vice president of ITT, then a vice president of a little company that started out as Alsace Lorraine Telecom, sometimes later known as Alcatel, and executive vice president of both of those. 8 years as Secretary of Administration or Director of Administration, Department of Administration in North Carolina under the governor, a cabinet position. Another 8 years as Chief Advisor of Technology Information, also a cabinet position in North Carolina. She's had many honorary positions and active committee-type positions with the White House, once with the Reagan administration, once with the Carter administration, also with the Clinton administration, where she was the one that chooses the White House fellows, specifically the Reagan administration, and then she worked as the Productivity and Quality Advisor Council with Carter, and then Information Infrastructure with Clinton. And she was probably one of the authors of the application process for E-rate, and has done a lot of other things. She also was involved with intellectual property, the rewrite of intellectual property policies in the United States, were part of that administration. She's received numerous awards. She's most proud of the North Carolina Award, which is given by the governor. And then there's a Lone Pine Tree Award.
Order the longleaf pine.
Oh, Order the Longleaf Pine, which apparently is a very desirous and desirable award. And 2 governors didn't have them, and she did. And so, anyway, she told me a story about that stuff. She's on the Kennedy School Advisory Council, and I think John Kelly knows her from that position. And she's been 30 years on the Reynolds Board of Trustees, which is the large tobacco company foundation in North Carolina, the largest in North Carolina. I know her as having served with her for 2 years now as part of the Rural Telecom Congress, and she is counsel, and I'm president of that organization, she's vice president. And she's on the advisory board of 2 small broadband companies in North Carolina, so that she keeps her oar in the water, stays humble, understands what these small companies are faced with as they try to advance broadband in her state. She's also the first woman Rotarian in North Carolina. And you can imagine that change over the place over the 70s.
Glass ceiling thing.
She speaks 4 languages: Russian, Japanese, passably, French, fluently, and English. And swamp talk. She's also been published in a bestseller in Japan, in Japanese, on indigenous communities, and in Europe, she was published on a book on ordinances, mapping, and geographic systems. And one of her proudest achievements is what she's doing right now, happening with aquariums, the large aquarium systems that make up North Carolina's, where there's 5 or 6 major aquariums in North Carolina. And there's a lot of ramifications to that for ocean studies and all kinds of things that go on with that. The list is numerous. I've only covered just part of it. But I am very, very proud to be a friend of Jane. She's been one of these people that has allowed for a substantial amount of cross-pollination. And many people who I've met, many of them, are indebted to her for their advance to their own careers. And for that, she will be forever remembered as a mentor. And she's been one of my mentors also. I give you Jane Banks.
Thanks, Galen. It's great to be here in Arizona again and to meet some of you I've met before. And I'm going to try to get through this fairly quickly. Let me just say what he didn't mention is that the hardest job I've ever had is being married to the same person for decades. And raising 2 no wonderful, so I got friends now. And today coming over here, I had a call from my husband who's had 4 airplane changes since he talked to me yesterday. We're trying to get back together so we can get together this weekend. And so maybe it's the fact that we just don't see each other. That's why it works so well. I put this up for a reason. Inch by inch, mile by mile, bite by bite. And if I say anything to you today that you should remember, it's that Arizona can be where it wants to be if it sticks to it over the long run. And you're going to see that as I go through this process today. I wanted to just show you this, to show you how far back it really goes in the process that we started. In 1984, the first digital statewide network was actually set up in North Carolina, and the state government did it in a partnership with the telephone companies at that point, Bell South and GTE and Embark. Then in 1987, we actually did with Fujitsu in Japan, in a supercomputer, the first connections on a hospital and a digital highway over to Chapel Hill and cancer research. Then in 1994, we did a statewide fiber backbone across the state, once again working with the companies, all the companies, the big telcos, as we call them, also the telephone co-ops who were there, all working together, and we were able to do a statewide fiber backbone. What the state gained from it is we got a huge fiber across the state. We got connection between the universities so that they could have classes back and forth across the state, all the 16 from Mania to Murphy. And in case you wonder how big North Carolina is, if you take North Carolina and you actually rotate Raleigh, North Carolina, straight north, it would be north of Boston before you get to the end of North Carolina. If you looked at it on the horizontal side, you would see that if you drew a line straight north from Murphy, North Carolina, you would be west of Detroit. It's a very, very big state, 10th largest state in the country, 9.7 million, approaching 10 million people. And so estuaries and mountains and topography that are really pretty, certainly not as serrated as I see flying in Arizona, but still in mountains of at least 7,000 feet there. The gigabit connection test, we jumped into full-heartedly to do with Duke and Osaka, Japan, to show the G8 nations how you could connect with broadband. This was, again, back in the late 80s. And then in 2000, the Rural Internet Access Authority was set up by the state legislature. And when you know it, it didn't give it any money. But it set it up. And so MCNC, which is, you're going to hear me talk about, NCRIN, North Carolina Research Education Network, MCNC was established by the state legislature to actually jumpstart semiconductors, and as a result, gave it $40 million. That year, in 2000, we had at MCNC created a company out of some research we did and sold it for $790 million to JDS Uniphase. And that gave us around $250 million at MCNC to be an endowment under MCNC. MCNC was no longer a state entity, received no state money at all, but it gave that $30 million back to the Rural Internet Access Authority to begin its operation. And then two-thirds of the state distributed throughout the state for broadband. How did we do that? We decided that what we wanted to do as a board, we had a board, again, named by the legislature. Think about how we set it up. So we did really weird things. Set up by the legislature, no money, but the legislature actually had appointments, as did the governor, and it was broadly set up. We had some companies on at that time, Time Warner and Bell South and CenturyLink were all on the board. We actually had an electric co-op on the board. And with that, we decided, working together with 8 committees and meeting every month, and the committee is rolling up into the board, which met every month for 3 years. And you have to realize you're really moving in that period of time to be doing that much work on all the various committees. And we decided half of that money, the $30 million, would be dispensed for developing broadband in the state with RFP process, and half of that money would be spent on outreach and really going to the citizens and building across North Carolina the real desire for broadband in their communities. And North Carolina has 85 rural counties and 15 urban counties. So you can see that we're very rural. We're actually, half of our state right now is rural population and half of the state is urban. And if you look at Texas, it's the only state of the 50 states that has more people in rural areas than North Carolina. And we're gaining on them. We're now only 150,000 less than they are in terms of their rural population. So we have a huge rural population. And then in Chica, we started back in 1992 by rolling it out as a nonprofit out of the governor's office, no money from the state. And it was an effort to jumpstart all of the companies in the state to gain the knowledge of what broadband could do for them. So it's the banks, it is the pharmaceutical companies, it is the data networks, it is all of the telecom companies at that time, all of the medical schools, and I just go down the list. It's a huge number of folks, all the time trying to build across the state the capability to sustain a real desire for broadband, so that whatever the Rural Internet Access Authority did, it would live on, because originally we only had 3 years, and at the end of 3 years, the legislature extended the authority. What did we do to move forward with adoption and availability? We decided at that time that we would do a map. No one had done a map in the country or their state. So we developed the first map in 2000. And we had everything was done by RFP processes. However, think about this. Established by the state legislature, but said that the Rural Center would staff it. The Rural Center is a nonprofit. So we were under the Rural Center. We didn't have money. So the Rural Center contracted with MCNC for $30 million and passed it through to us. We didn't have to worry about state procurement. We got the Attorney General, though, to be our lawyer, and got the Attorney General to look at whether we could give money to private sector companies. They ruled that anyone could receive our money because it wasn't state money. It was coming from the actual nonprofit known as MCNC. So we were able to move much quicker, but we always looked at research first, then we moved ahead, then we had third parties come in and look at how we had performed, and then we changed, the course as you would any private sector company when you needed to move ahead. So we did the infrastructure inventory in 2001, and just for your information, you'll love this in the state, the bids came in from $100,000 to $10 million, okay, to do the same thing. You've never seen stuff like that. And we knew that the people who bid $100,000 couldn't do it. So we ended up selecting for $1 million to do the first one, and actually that went to what is now known to you as Bearing Point. Okay, it was KPMG, it was something else, but it was KPMG at the time. And they had no earthly idea how to do it. We ended up having to learn how to do it with them. And then we did a citizen survey saying, where are the citizens? What do we have to do with this? So we've done 8 surveys in North Carolina where the citizens are every 2 years. Again, not doing it ourselves, going out to the folks at universities to do this with small amounts of money that we use. I think the first survey was $20,000. And then the second citizen survey cost us really basically $155,000 because at that time we actually talked to 12,500 citizens across the whole state. And in the state, in the counties that were most distressed, we would talk to 500 in a county to try to get that kind of information. And then we went local government and said to the local governments, where do you stand? Remember, this was back in the early 90s. Early 2000s, where do you stand? And so we set up a local government fund to go out and pick 37 local governments in the state to be transactional and show them how to do it, to do the training and show them how. And then we had the government training done by the states over at the University from the Center for Public Technology, which was a carry-through from the early 90s deployment on the information highway. We had created back then a Center for Public Technology, which was all of the local government in technology, trying to, no one could get it funded, the legislature wouldn't look at it, wouldn't do anything. So finally with us this time, with the money we gave them, they were able to get that center operational. Now it does the following. It certifies CIOs in the county governments in North Carolina. And it now is used to other states, where other states bring them in to do this kind of training. It's a fantastic program. So anyway, we also did digital literacy training. Again, RFPs we sent out, and folks could bid to do this training. And then they came back in and we selected groups to go out and do the training. And then e-business workshops, same thing. Where are you in e-business? And again, the university did that for us. And we began to do training for local small businesses of how to use the internet to enhance their business and to operate their business. We also then looked at education, looked at the different e-learning summits started in 2002, but it's taken us since 1994, when we got the information highway, to a year ago when we finished the education portal. I think the year is there. Now if you go to www.elearningmc.gov and you are a citizen in North Carolina, you can find out courses K through into infinity, from the schools to the community colleges to the learn and earn to the universities, of how to get online and take college courses and get credits that way. It has been the biggest problem for us was the university system. I'll be very upfront with you. The universities just couldn't get together. The public schools were the easiest to deal with, community colleges next, and the universities worst. Having been a vice chancellor of a university, I can tell you why, but I won't right now. But anyway, the e-learning summit, again, a virtual school where 55,000 kids are taking classes. In our state, if you want to get into one of the Research One universities, you got to have 9 AP classes to get in. If you just apply. And so kids in rural areas just can't get that. So now with the virtual school, they can get that. We have 55,000 high school kids now in AP classes taking online. excuse me. So then we did the e-health survey in 2002. And that was, how do we get hospitals, nonprofit hospitals connected? How do we get our, believe it or not, how do we get the county health departments, which most of the county governments don't want to pay for? How do we get the county health departments connected across the state? And then how do we get nonprofit hospitals connected across the state? And it took us until 2010 when we got money from the Rural Health Pilot Project in Washington. No, we didn't get it, but because you have something like the Rural Internet Access Authority, we were able to reach out to Cabarrus County, to the hospitals in East Carolina and down on the coast, who all had applied for money and no one knew how to use it. They had been awarded the money, had no earthly idea how to do it. And so we went to Cabarrus County and said, how about letting us take your project, the one up in the mountains at the university, the one in the east, and the one over on the coast, and we will put together a North Carolina telehealth network. And so we were able to work with the federal government who didn't want to see that go down the tube, and they let us have that money. And now we have 100 hospitals connected, nonprofit hospitals, and connected to each other. And we're going now after the next money, which is available to all of you, the Rural Health, no longer the pilot project, $400 million a year. And you can go after that money. And I would encourage you to go now, because there's half of 400 right now. But only, it's no longer pilot, it will go on to infinity, because it's coming out of the money from the Universal Services Fund. And so I would say go after the money now in Arizona. You have a good telehealth initiative started here. So I would say go after that. We then said, okay, farmers in North Carolina, they are still where most of our money, our GDP in North Carolina has a lot of farming in it. Although we've lost tobacco and lots of other agriculture, is very much at the top. So we went to Washington and talked to them and said, what do you know about farmers? What do you know about computers? And they said, not much. You remember, look back when this was. And so they paid $40,000, we paid $40,000, and did a total analysis of the farms in North Carolina farmers. Well, I was a Farm Bureau and came out with a report, and then came out with a program of working with farmers. If you want to come in this county and you want to be involved, you can come in and learn how to use a computer, and in many instances you could get one then from the program we had with USDA, and you then were online as a farmer. So the Farm Bureau and were very much supporters of us. So you can see what we've done. We've looked at education, we've looked at health, we've looked at agriculture, and we've looked at business, small businesses. I'll show you in a little bit. But the one thing we did with our e-communities, we started an e-communities program where we went to county commissioners and we said to the county manager, I'm going to give you $10,000 and you start a program where you select the people who are going to be members in a broad way, and you create in your community people who know, we'll train them, and they help develop the program on broadband in your community. Absolutely all 85 rural counties accepted. We didn't tell the urban counties we were going to do anything because we were the Rural Internet Access Authority at that time. And so instead, we let the urban counties opt in. So Charlotte and Mecklenburg and actually Wilmington opted in. We didn't give them any money, but they could come to our training. We didn't charge for that. So we set this up saying, you don't know anything probably. Maybe you do. But our handbook on our connections with citizens, community engagement handbook, you could really learn how to operate in your county if you got that. But then we did training on a monthly basis with those e-communities. We brought them in to Raleigh, to the Research Triangle, and let them really get through osmosis, feel what it was like to be in a high-tech offices. Because the IBMs, the Ericssons, the Ciscos paid for us to be there and to give us food. And they were able to go through the operations there, and then we did training there. As John knows, John and I spent a lot of time at Harvard free, okay? And so I called up one of my professors there and said, hey, you owe me. I said, if you will come down here, I'm going to invite leaders, 200 leaders across our state, and we're going to have a Harvard professor train them on the connection of broadband to economic development. And they came and they got to hear Jerry over about 4 months, once a month, and then they got a nice little Harvard certificate. I mean, and you know, everybody likes a Harvard certificate after a while. Really. So, and then they also had their county managers come in with us folks, and the governor came and gave them certificates on their e-communities program, so success. We did an e-business manual for local businesses. We taught them how to do podcasting going across the state, showing them how to do podcasting, showing them how to do web, all the different things, how do you organize, Quicken Books. I mean, all this stuff was given free at a number of sites across the state. And we did a broadband access overview booklet that tells you all about broadband, how costs roll up, et cetera. So we were just educated. You learn this when you, at least in North Carolina, you learn it. Continuing, we did public engagement grants. We gave each county $20,000 to create a public access site. And they had to, in 2 years, they had to have it running with no cost. We couldn't give them any more money. And they're still operational today. The same with the e-community planning grant, $10,000 to each of them. And then we created a task force of high school kids and in some key rural counties. And about 26 of those took those high school kids and let them go out and work with businesses, work with people in their homes, got the disclaimer things you need to have signed by people when you go in their homes. And at the end of that time of the year when they were seniors, they got $1,000 to the college that they've been admitted to. Go to college. But it was their sort of, thank you for what you're doing. Here's $1,000 going to the college that you got into. And then with the e-communities grants, as we talked about, the public access, the telecenters, we did a program where we said, let's prove that in rural North Carolina, we can go in 7 of the most distressed counties, and we can create an entity called a telecenter that literally can change that county totally. We can take it, move it towards the future from the past that's agricultural, doing value-added agriculture with connectivity, but also doing, we believe rural people are smart, that they're not dumb. They can be involved in technology programs as well. So we said, let's prove that you can do that. So we talked to the economic development commissions out there. We put out an RFP. We had a lot of counties respond. They all had to respond on their own. And there are all kinds of templates like this you can look at. And so we ended up picking 9. The first 2, they always say government can't do anything right? If you recall that they did back in the, back in, I think, the 70s, they created new cities in the country. They picked 7 they were going to create, and actually 4 of them came out and were really good. If that is in the private sector, they'd say, great, what a success. Everybody said it failed. It was the federal government. But anyway, it actually was a success. Columbia, Reston, Woodland, these are the cities that were actually created. So 2 of them we lost off the bat. One of them I was convinced was fraud. Instead, I didn't sit on the thing select. I let his board select it. And one of them got, I won't get into it, but he got into you don't have problems for legislators trying to influence, I'm sure. But anyway, we had a situation where that happened, and I said, I wouldn't fund that county. I grew up next door to it. I wouldn't fund it. And so, but they funded it. And so we ended up having to pull that money back because it was definitely a situation where we thought fraud was involved. And then the second one was the same way. We had 7 of them working, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit more. But we have proved beyond a shadow of a doubt with the Research Triangle Institute doing analysis that you can, in fact, in extremely distressed counties, create a situation in the county where it totally transforms itself with people who are just very diverse ethnically. I mentioned the public access grants. You say, where did you get training? And I said, well, you see it shamelessly. I've been involved in a project in New Brunswick with Premier McKenna and on innovation. I've done a lot of work on innovation, and he asked me to help him with that. And I said, okay, I've got a quid pro quo for you. I know you have the public access program up here in New Brunswick, and I need you to come train the people we're doing with public access. Well, for Canadians, that was wonderful. They love to come to North Carolina in January, where it's 48 and they think they're in, the Caribbean. And so it's really they've been wonderful. They've come there and they've helped train our folks in public access on how to develop them. They had a great program in New Brunswick called Connect New Brunswick. In digital literacy training, the same thing. We had those going out to the e-communities working on digital literacy. And in telecenters, Tier 1 and Tier 2, that's our worst counties in the state in terms of economic development. I mentioned the Harvard training and the utilizing the high-tech site. And the surveys, I mentioned those, the fact that they really have assisted the e-communities. One of the things that we did that really was the most fun, I think, was with all of the research and all of the education and working with these committees and e-communities, the one thing we found is that they've never written a fundraising application. They had never written one. And so we began to show them how to do that, and we held monthly training sessions on how to write grants, how to apply for them. And once we had done that, we decided we need to, every month, we need to go out. You can buy these programs that tell you what grants are going on. That's a lot of money. So we had one person I knew from HUD who had started a consulting firm, and I said, why don't you do a program each month and put it up on our website? Here is all the funding opportunities this month. So that was out there for every single county in the state, their e-communities to go after. And so that was a big plus for us. But then we said, they don't know how to map national data down into their actual community. So the same professor at East Carolina who had done all of the surveys for us, all 8 that tell us over the last 11 years how much we've gone from 32% to about 87% of our households who can actually get this. Now, let me give you this flavor. Our map at the state says that 99% of our state has access in the household. At the first level, you have to turn in on the map to NTIA. It says that at 96% have the next level, which is 3 megs down, okay? Well, the FCC says it's 4 megs down you need to have, and I would say from Jay Patterson it's 10 megs down that you should have to have, minimum, if you really want to do interactive classes online. So that's pretty good, where we've come from. But we know that map is not correct. Now, it may be that the companies think they're covering all that, but it's something that's not correct when we talk to the citizens, and they directly tell you what they have. And so that's, we just sort of a cross check. Here's what one person says, here's what the other, we're crowdsourcing. But we're crowdsourcing between the private sector companies and the citizens about what they have, is what we're doing. And on the connectivity, we've done the map of the states, we've done the individual counties, we've done the gap analysis, and we have taken the incentives back in 2000 and put out $13.5 million to move things forward. How did that move things forward, though? This is one of the most fun things we did. We actually set up a communications plan for us, so we're going out to do outreach. What do we need to do? And so we actually set aside $2 million to hire a communications firm. We didn't tell them that's what we had, but we had the communications team of our committees of board put an RFP out and then actually interviewed everyone and selected French West Mullins to be our communications team. And they, every week on a Monday, without fail, for 3 years, I met with that team, and I have a list of logs of things we had to do on communication across the state. I'm just going to give you a couple of things to show you this. The TV and radio was the first thing we went after, and that was, we went to the Ad Council and said, would you take this on? We really think this is critical. We know that ether seals and all the others are great, but this is the actual economic health of North Carolina. We need you, but they didn't do it. And so then we went to WRAL, which is the Raleigh station, and said to Jim Goodman, who's just a saint, Jim, will you write a letter to every TV station saying, if I give you a first-class video, will you run this at no charge for the Rural Internet Access Authority? We did the same with the key radio guy, Don Curtis, who's been in my class at Chapel Hill. Don, will you do this? Don said he would. We got $2 million back in no charge notices from the TV stations and from the radio stations that they had run these. And we actually did a video that was done by a production group, and we did a call for acting, and we had all kinds of people show up in Jackson County, and over a weekend they shot in a diner the video that played all across the state about why we need broadband. On newspapers, they ran ads. The e-communities went to the newspaper with the ad clicks and said, will you run this free? This is one of them, which is one of my favorites. And it says at the top, Nana, before the internet, saw grandkids during the holidays. After the internet, She sees them every night. And it's just, there's stuff you can do just about anything over the internet, get an education, grow a business, search for jobs, or communicate with family members. Once you log on, the ENC initiative is here to bring affordable internet access to all North Carolinians. The ENC is here to help people like Dana take full advantage of everything the internet can offer you. So we had ads like this. We had an ad about owning a business, a mechanic. We had lots of these everywhere. And on every single public access site, it says the ENC initiative has brought you this site. It was just literally setting the standard for what we were in the state. Let me go back one more thing. Posters, plaques, training on communications. We brought in your key people who wanted training on communications and actually gave them training. We brought in the chairman of each of the ENC communities groups out there and had the key people in French homes videotape them talking on television or radio so they could see what they were like and train 100 people across our state who could be in one of the 100 counties going out. So, then new type of survey. I want you to see this. We're always trying to say, what can we do to show things to people across the state about how important broadband is to the economy? And so in 2010, I had run across in Canada when I was up there a guy who worked with Industry Canada called Michael Curry. And Michael had called me and told me he started a new company, and it was really focused on he's an economist, the impact of the economy on broadband, by broadband. So we asked him if we could work with him to look at North Carolina targeting small businesses, nonprofits, local government, and the healthcare sector. You'll see us repeating this. Education's not there, but the other groups that we work with are. And so the Secretary of Commerce signed a letter given out to we had 75,000 companies got a letter from the head of the Secretary of Commerce. The NC Center for Nonprofits sent letters out to all of our nonprofits in North Carolina. We have 12,000 nonprofits in our state. The Association of County Commissioners sent letters out to everyone, the League of Municipalities, and then in Chico to all the hospitals in the state. Now, that's a lot. We got back 6,266 organizations responded, and we also sent it out to households, and 1,492 households responded. Now, here's what we came up with, which is broadband is responsible for 17.5% of all new jobs in North Carolina in 2010. Small businesses are more reliant on broadband for job creation. Percent of new jobs, for example, employees 0 to 19, 27.9% of those folks are literally attribute their jobs directly to the internet. When you get over here to the 500, that's really 0 to 500. 100 to 500, only 13% say that. But the bigger you are, the less they percentage of the job. So when you get here to the end, it's 17.5% across that. All right, choosing where to locate. 55% said broadband is essential for remaining in their current location. And the importance, you can see the numbers that go across. And if you want this presentation, you're welcome to it. Blue stands for essential, very important for red, somewhat important for green, not important, 14.6, blue, not sure, and 25% not applicable, okay? I don't know if that's funeral homes or what, but could be. Really. And then the remaining in the locations, you can see all those. 65% said that it's important to remaining in the location. And business revenue. The internet, so this goes back to generating revenue for the businesses and organizations that employ up to 500 people. 16.6% of revenues are attributed to using the internet. That's just the same number as we pointed out when I'm back here, the 0 to 500. So you can see that. The set of organization by number is average revenue for organization, average revenue from internet use, and the percent revenue from the internet. 100 to 499, 16.4%, and 0 to 19 again, 18%. This is a magnificent database, by the way. It's become one of the most important databases, I think, in the country that Query has developed. On personal home business, this really hit us. 32% of North Carolina home-based businesses currently use broadband, 32%. An additional 14% are planning to create a home-based business using broadband. So what this says is that out in rural North Carolina, that we have got like 46% of the people, once they do this, 14%, that are really adding to their income at their homes through the use of the Internet. So this led us to go out and do training for folks in small businesses on how to gain more from the Internet in their small business. So this has been a really important database as we have decided how to move and what to do in our efforts. And then along came a windfall to the state in terms of federal stimulus funds. And you have had your BIPs, which is from USRDA, and your VTOP, which is into National Telecom and Commerce. But we set out ourselves not to go for any of the extra federal stimulus funds at where we are, but rather to go after helping any site in the state, any company, private or whatever, to go after money. And so we sent letters. We helped them with all of this database information. From Washington, we got $264 million from the state, and you know, one in comprehensive infrastructure, $120 million, public computing projects, $2 million, and a total for VTOP was $126, which isn't all the money because remember there's a 20% match and 24% here. So let me show you what happens with all of this. This is, you only see these counties right here. This is what's called as the crescent in North Carolina, going from Charlotte all the way over like this. None of these counties really went after the money. These are counties that are really suppressed, okay? These counties, look at how much the state got from money that went into every county that has got some color in it or a crosshatch got money was touched. And so the, we have also Tri-County Telecom. These are all co-ops, Country Cable, a private sector cable company, a co-op, this is electric co-op here, telephone co-op, French Broad Electric Co-op, telephone, Wilkes Telecom, and Skywise, and Urban, Utopia Wireless. They really were a group we didn't know anything about, but they didn't pan out. They disappeared. There's somewhere that bid $50 million across the whole country, and it didn't work out. But I want to explain one thing to you about all of these various projects here, what I want to tell you about them. Okay. We wrote letters. We did, everything we could do to help these people. We had the congressional delegation. We did everything to try to get money. So we ended up, okay, I want you to see this. This is the NC-REN, which I told you about. Remember, MCNC, jump-started by the state, became a private sector nonprofit company, and then this is over a period of from 84 to now. It's now the Research Education Network in North Carolina. Keep this in mind. It has, we have been offering, we connect every school in the state. We connect over, I've been on the board of NCC, no longer on the board. I'm now just doing technical, giving free time on technical advice. We don't get any money for serving the board. It's all gratis. But it's a passionate group of folks about education and broadband that are on this. And what we did, MCNC went after money. We have fiber network that runs across just like this by all the big companies, but it runs from the big cities all across the state. That's where it runs. And even though they have 24 counties, such as right in here with AT&T, they have great in their little cities, but outside, when you get 18,000 feet out, not a hell of a lot. And so we had identified with NTIA money over 6,000 community institutions in North Carolina. And so the goal was, how do we get those institutions that are outside the Crescent area of North Carolina going all like this, and how do we get them all connected? So keep in mind that the proposed fiber route for VTOP is the red. You see that? All across the state coming in like this. all the way down. That's pretty amazing. You see this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then this was already the initial blue part of MC-RAN. They already had this. And they also had, if you look at the green, the proposed rider route for VTOP 1. This is VTOP 1. You see that? And then there's some more green up in here. And then this is all filling in all the way across. Once they found out we were going for this, everyone wanted to be connected in some way. And so we didn't have the money for the match. So right here in Rocky Mount, there is a Golden Leaf Foundation, which is the money the state got in the buyout. So the Golden Leaf Foundation came and did the match for this and provided that $24 million in match that was needed. And so now you have an amazing, not only was this 10 gigs, it's 40 gigs right now, and in about 3 months, it'll be a 100 gig network. Think of this, 100 gigs all the way across here. No state in the country has that. But it's been a long, long haul. What I wanted you to think about, two things. If you take nothing back from this, number one is be in it for the long haul. It has been Democratic governors, Republican governors, all sticking together on we have to provide this, all sticking together. And it's been the businesses, the education folks, and the private sector telephone companies involved, and the co-op. Now, every co-op in North Carolina, by the end of 2013, will have fiber to the home. These are people who serve from 5 people per route mile to 12 people per route mile. Think about that. 5 to 12. They will have fiber to the home. Now, this is one thing I wanted to tell you about this. I knew I forgot something. I talked to one of them because it's down, I grew up right down here. You can see right into the ocean. My insurance on my mother's home down there, $5,000 because we're 12 miles from tidal water. Think about that. That's hurricanes of it, you know. But, and down here, it's swamp hawk, it's snakes, it's cougars, it's bears, it's all, you know, all down in here. And that's what's there. And so, you know, one of the things that we wanted to be able to do with dealing with, you know, the companies, as I said to one of my cousins, how can y'all afford to go for this? This is the ATM, Atlantic Telco, right down in here. He said to me, guess what, Jane? He said, if I were to go out today and put fiber to the home for everyone, it's 50 years payback. But if I can get what they're offering from the RUF this year, it's 20 years payback. And my people on my board, they say go for it. Go for it. We did the same thing with electricity. Let's go for it. So 20-year payback they're willing to do in those communities for that. And that's, you know, their figures. I thought I'd tell you that. But 100 gigs, can you imagine what this means? I mean, can you imagine for me down here, I had bookmobiles. But if I had access to a 100 gig network, I mean, kids who were at the Northbound School of Math and Science when they had, you know, access to 10X, started companies in their own high school rooms, in the residential high school. I mean, it's just amazing what you can do when you have access to this all the time. So, working since then, working directly in communities, developing the plans with the rural counties and the eastern band of the Cherokee. The eastern band of the Cherokee now have their own middle mile fiber network, and Charlotte and Wilton opting in. There's the technical assistance, the partners with broadband providers and deployment and adoption, private sector and nonprofit broadband service providers to find solutions, one-to-one funding when we had our projects, and never did we only have one-to-one. It was at least 1 to 2.5 to every dollar that we put in, that they matched us from the private sector. And funding solutions for broadband efforts, looking everywhere to help anyone who wants to get ahead. And that's why I stick with this little northeastern North Carolina ISP. I mean, I try to, because it makes me look for what's out there in Washington or wherever it is. It could be in Europe. I'm here to tell you that there are foundations in Europe that are funding in the United States today. There are foundations in Europe doing that. And so, you know, you need to look where you think you can't find the money, then it's there. I mean, and sometimes a really neat guy or woman who's made $2 billion says, I can get by with only $400 million less. I want to fund it for my part of the state. Anyway, okay, out of the box, try them. I just want to bring this up. We put in our thing to Washington we want to try light up. We want to go into a county that has a program that is where, you know, if you are on food stamps, you can get your telephone service discount. We want to go into a county and work with either a private sector company, like one of the big ones, or a small co-op, and try this and see how we morph it to broadband and show you from the county level in Washington how to do this, rather than the Washington trying to tell us how to do this as a county and not understanding how the county level works. And so they funded it. It has been, I can understand why Washington couldn't do it. It's taken 2.5 years to get through the lawyers at one of the big companies to do this in Durham, North Carolina. It's taken us we had to give up on another one that a national funder of broadband just couldn't do it, decided they couldn't do it. Lawyers again, I'm sorry, lawyers. And then we got little Wilkes County in the West, telephone co-op, said, yes, let's do it. And here we're providing the computer, we're providing the training, and we're providing the service free for some, not so free for others. It's a real research project to see what people will pay in the lower income level to get this kind of service. And so that's taken us, probably no one else would put up with it, but it gets started in Wilkes in about another month, and we'll see how that goes. My county research day, I pointed out to you, if you don't do anything else, try to do that with your counties to show them how to map in all that national research into their counties for when they go after a grant. Find the funding, train the locals. As I said, don't forget, it's the long haul, and at the same time, it is the situation of helping the people build within the reservoir that they need broadband, and they're going to work to get it. They're going to work with you at the state level. They're going to work at the regional level. And then the telecenters proving that people in rural areas that are very distressed can, in fact, transform their counties as a result of technology being used there. We even did technopreneurs in those counties. Technology entrepreneur who works with small businesses and helps startups. And in one telecenter, they started 84 companies that year. Wireless pilots in rural areas, showing that those work. One's no longer around, basically, so I don't mind using their name. But one of the companies that was out there, even when we were going to match them, 1-to-1, they wouldn't go into one of those rural counties. And I said to someone, that group's going out of business. It's a national group. It's now out of business. But e-communities, again, important, mapping your state, being able to show to Aaron what the survey says about areas he's going to spend money, and being able to track it from 1999 to 2000 to 2001 to 2003, 4, 8, 10, and to show that progression. Legislators like that kind of thing. Now, think forward, push it. All schools connected. We worked on that from 1992 to finally getting it done 2 years ago. Now we have put up a cloud across the state for our schools, so that the schools are not having to do, a lot of the things that schools just don't have people who know what to do. And now they can buy and serve through the cloud and go back into the school a lot cheaper than any of the things they'd have to pay for. Again, we've got templates there for people to look at. On the GigU connectivity, how many of you know GigU? GigU is, I'm not sure if Arizona's in this. Is Arizona?
Yes, we are.
Okay. GigU we put out our RFP last week. If you want to see that, you go to the Council of Governments, RTC Council of Government, Triangle, and you'll see the entire RFP. It was put out last week for, again, it's not just State, Carolina, and Duke. It sounds like tobacco road basketball. But Wake Forest is also in this. And so ultimately in North Carolina, what you have seen is we work to make sure that people aren't left out. So Wake Forest will go way to the northwest. And it won't be long before Charlotte will be in there. So we pull in all these universities. But they will go out and we got more money, and they can figure out the issues on the first. The telehealth trials, we're moving ahead now. After the hundreds of hospitals are working ahead and going after 400 plus more, the 100 gig network. The broadband initiated by counties. 2 weeks ago, I was up in Person County which is a county in our state north of the Research Triangle. And their county manager, his deputy, had graduated from Davidson. She had gone into Carolina, got her MPA from there, but she didn't know anything about broadband. So her county commissioners, remember this, a county that's in a rural county on the border said, we want to put $500,000 into the areas of our state, our county that don't have it. And so get an RFP out there and see what we can get. So myself and another person went up there to help them look through the RFP to say whether it's a good one, whether they're getting what they needed, if we have at least 30 questions that sent back out to ask folks to help her out doing that. So there are a number of us now that are willing to go, no charge, out in these counties, and there are 5 people working out of the MC Broadband, which is the follow-on of where I was, that go out and help people with that. Look at this, one-to-one computing for kids. 100 of our 115 districts are out there now with one-to-one computing. And all 2,400 schools, and actually 2,700 if you add the charter schools, have access to GigU network. Metrics and measurements, and I'm almost through. The ROI of $5 billion in economic impact on the broadband deployment across North Carolina, no multiplier applied. I don't know anyone that would not want to have that. I mean, it's really 10 times return from the ARRA that you're getting for. That is the estimate of economists nationally. Now, notice we're not using multipliers, but theirs is 10 times. We know that the telecommunity, we helped do the $250 million in broadband. We created the 7 business and tech centers. The business and tech centers created 2,000 jobs in Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. Folks, these are counties that have $27,000 per capita income. I mean, these are not counties with a lot of money. Served more than 26,500 clients. Trained more than 13,000 people in 3,288 classes for a total of 1.4 million classroom hours. Offered technical services to 192 organizations that were tenants of these 7 groups that had been developed. And public on-site internet access, every one of them had to have a public access site to 200,000 users. And created technopreneurs with support and training and entrepreneurship. We trained everyone. We offered training and entrepreneurship to all of our e-communities also. We brought in the rural, from the University of Missouri, the RUPRI group to do that training and entrepreneurship. And in North Carolina, we have a group called RULE, the Rural Entrepreneurial Action Network, and it trains you and helps start businesses. And so the BTTs generated $221 million in additional state revenue from job creation with no multiplier effect. And the state entity now is NC Broadband. It's in the Department of Commerce. And they have $6.6 million through 2014 for operations. This is the state money that,
we have about $3 million here.
They got $3 million here. And critical to success is leadership. It is your people deciding you're going to lead this thing, and it's going to be for the long haul. You can't start it and interrupt it. You've got to be committed for the long haul. I've shown you going back, people say, oh, look what North Carolina has. But the same people, the same different leadership in our capital, all have said throughout this year, we have to stick to it, we have to keep with it. It's inch by inch, it's mile by mile, and it's bite by bite. And the research initiatives are critical to showing what you can do and what you have done, the tracking of the incentives, the outcomes, and how you learn from them, your community involvement so they know that it's up to them as well as you to do this, your statewide training summits. We did statewide training summits at least once a year where we actually went out and brought in anyone who wanted to learn about wireless 8 years ago. And we did a wireless summit for anyone who wanted to come, and people came from states around us and showed up and said, okay, come on. Came through. But business and telecom industry involvement, teaching how to fundraise, the communications campaign, I personally feel is probably the most critical thing we did. The involvement of universities and the support of governor in the legislative executive branch. That may be fun. I think that may be it. I'll tell you one thing I used a lot when I was out, and finish it with that. And this is I grew up in that small area of southeastern North Carolina. My dad was 58 when I was born. He didn't get married until he was 47 because he looked after his mother until she died. My mother was a school principal. We went down there to teach. She was 22 years younger than him. And I was the youngest. And I was always a problem because I was always, trying to blow a floor in the whole chemistry set on the second floor, figure out with my brother if oxygen taken out of a can of gasoline really wouldn't explode and maybe put one in, things like that. So I was always telling everybody that, I know that they blew up the dam in Tabor City and Lake Tabor City. I bet it was my dad because he never catches any fish. And I'm serious. I was really notorious for always anyway. So when I finished college really young, and when I was in Philadelphia working in research on computers, I decided to go out, and my dad was Baptist, and you weren't supposed to smoke, you weren't supposed to dance, you weren't supposed to gamble, you couldn't play cards. I mean, it was all that. And so I decided, well, I'm thinking out there, I'm going to go out to the racetrack in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and I'm going to bet on the horses. So I went out to the racetrack, and that morning I got up in North Philadelphia, and went out and got on the what's called the subway surface car. It's above ground and goes under, it's just one car. And so I got on that, and it was car number 55. And so I went, oh boy, I don't know that horses, but I need to remember that number. So I got to the next to the subway station down at Broad Street, and I got on that subway, it was 5555. I thought, okay. I got off at a meeting at 5510 Center on the 5th floor. I went in, and that was 555 on the number of the. So I got out to the racetrack on the bus for a quarter, and it had 5 on it. So I went inside, and I was looking, and all of a sudden I fixated up on Flying Rocket was number 5. They were running in their 5th race, and I thought, man, 5 has come up everywhere, so I need to really. So I didn't have a lot of money because we weren't paid a lot at 10. And so I went in and put $5 down on the 5th Flying Rocket running in the 5th race, okay? And so here comes I went over with everybody else who was leaning over thinking, you just put $5 down. That's really dumb. Your dad would say, what is wrong with you? And so I went in there, and the horses ran, and they were running, and Flying Rocket was taking off, and I could see that $5. I could go to the movie or something. And I wanted to see Lawrence of Arabia, and it was on. And so I went, the race, is it? And by God, if old Flying Rocket didn't come in 5th. I went back, and I thought, hey, you've got too many degrees to be out here. And I looked up, and I went, I got to find the racing sheet. That's where you learn about racing. And I went in, and Flying Rocket had never been any higher than 5th in any race. He never run in. So the issue is, know your facts. Don't intuition. Know your facts. And so, I think that what I'm trying to tell you today is a true story of what's happened in North Carolina. But the second is the leadership is critical, and the communication to the public is critical, and to them back to you, and you assess that with all these surveys, and then decide, be in there for the long haul. It isn't all going to be done very quickly. And so we have been able in North Carolina to be pretty smart and to stick with it for the long haul. And we're always glad to help with anything we have. We've always shared all our manuals, everything with anyone. And so I'm glad to answer your questions. I know you don't have a lot of time. I tried to do what I could do. And time, Jeff, did I screw up?
Oh, you're great.
Okay. So that's it. As Paul Harvey would say.
Any questions for Jane?
Does the rural electric cooperatives then play a positive role in North Carolina?
The rural electric cooperatives, the rural telephone cooperatives did,
Also.
and the rural electric cooperatives played a great role. In fact, one of our board members was on the board for 6 years and did a great job. And the rural electric co-op gradually got into offering broadband, okay? But not a lot of them have. They sort of stayed away from it because their national organization has not always been in favor of that. They've done lots of surveys and have been very cautious about it. But you can see Atlantic Telecom was electric as well as telecom, and we've got two other electric companies that have done, telecom co-ops and electric co-ops. Yeah, but not every one of them has done that. Mainly the telecom co-ops.
So how much state government dollars have you operated off of over the history of this?
We had no state government dollars from 2000 to 2005. And in 2005, we were given $400,000. And then the next year, we got $1.5 million to create more telecenters because they were so impressed with the rural telecenters, but continued to get $400,000.
So mainly for adoption then, not for...
We never had money for broadband deployment.
Okay, only for adoption.
That was always with other money that we raised.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's it takes a lot of work. Any other questions? If you saw my email, if you want to email me questions, and if you're too timid to ask, I will respond.
Okay. I don't have a question, I have a comment, and for the board, we're 10 years behind. And maybe through internet speed we could get done in 7, 8 years. But this is pretty, they have a template, they have a roadmap.
We can learn from them and maybe faster.
There ain't no money, so we're going to have to get creative.
Got to be very creative to get the money to show up, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, maybe even further behind than 10 years in some ways too, right? I think there's a lot of things that you have going. And every state's different, right? Absolutely, right? I think the point where you're talking about the rural versus urban has a big impact, right? So I think because you are so rural, that value into that is a massive investment.
Easier argument.
Our numbers are a little bit different, right? 85%, 86% is urban population versus 15%, right?
But what about your land area, though?
Just exactly right. That'd be
we're 85 counties are rural and 15 are urban.
And we're 3 to 5% maybe. 14% of the state is privately held. The rest is,
Well, we have a huge amount of federal land in the mountains, which is a problem. That's where some of our worst broadband are because of the federal control of the land. But we were able to do something with that. I would say to you that you can move faster than you think. The one thing that I think is important to look at is that still, with all we have done, the biggest problem is off that middle mile and the last mile out to the home. That's still the biggest problem.
Absolutely.
And with the middle mile we've got out there now with the federal money, otherwise we wouldn't have that. Right. But that middle mile, the last mile, should be easier for companies to start. And there's been a number of econometric studies done recently that show that population density is not necessarily a problem with deploying broadband, okay? But it's not a fiscal problem.
So what role did higher ed play in all this?
They just took all the things we could give them. So higher ed, we're lucky in that we have 16 public universities that are across the whole state. They're in like the mountains, and they're pretty equidistant and across the state from each other. And they, you can't teach every single degree at all those. You can't have an engineering school at every one of those. You can't have a medical school at every one of those. So that really helped us create it where we could actually teach classes online. If you give me a typical example, this sounds really dumb, but one of the first things we used it for was teaching embalming, okay? We taught embalming across the network.
It's broadband and funeral home.
And funeral home, because there's just not, they didn't have those. So Central North Carolina is where the embalming classes were taught. And they went out to the mountains. They went over to the east, and they would tie in with local hospitals for the cadavers, okay? So, you just have to think out of the box. Out of the casket.
The pipe box.
So, but the universities support it for education, okay? Now, what is the cost? Right now, we 1978, when I became secretary, I aggregated all of the statewide initiatives, and everybody paid the same rate, and so it didn't cost any difference from Manio to Raleigh than it did from Durham to Raleigh. Okay, it's the same. And so that's made it so the universities also were able to pay that same kind of blended rate, and that's been a big plus for us to be able to do that. And anytime that we had a contract with one of the big companies, that's part of that blended rate that we would do that. So that has been, but the cost, to give you an idea what the schools are paying right now for this, the schools right now are paying $15 per megabit, and that covers, that covers the custom premises equipment, it covers the internet access, it covers internet too, and the backhaul, everything.
That's to the Tier 1 connection?
Uh-huh.
$15.
No matter how many megs.
No, per meg. Per meg.
It gets lower the more you use, okay? It gets lower the more you use. And so for schools, that's a really good deal. I mean, it's
Compare that to a T1 line at 1.5 meg for for $314, or
right.
in the rural areas, $1,175.
Sometimes they're higher. So the schools are getting a terrific deal, and the usage is very interesting. I can tell you that there are schools who are about 2 gigs right now. Think about that. I mean, there's schools, the more you give them, the more they want. And it's very, and of course I can tell you, it is the charter school in Raleigh that's using a lot more than any of the other charter schools. However, the Neuse River Charter School is right up there. It is all the way out on the coast. And one of the mountain charter schools is almost at the same. So it really depends on the school now. But now it doesn't matter. I mean, they can buy this at that really good rate. So, anyway.
Hi, Jane. Mark Goldstein.
Yes.
To you. Could you talk a bit about the relationship with the larger incumbents and how that may have evolved over time? Often they are a point of resistance, if I may say it, somewhat delicately, in public investment in infrastructure that they may see in telehealth or other places taking customers out of the game.
And issues, they still have within the local LEA, they still have a lot of those companies still involved, of the big companies. Secondly, you also have, let's think how to answer that. You also have cities in our state now, Salisbury, for example, and its CyberNet, and Wilson with its, starts with a G, I'm trying to remember what the name of it is, but it's Green Line. These are cities that for 2.5 years negotiated with the companies to try to get them to come in. And the companies would say, we're coming. We are coming. Well, when are you coming? Well, we're not sure yet, And I mean, mayors that would have these discussions, not that would have them. So it's gotten, as this has grown, it's gotten tenser, I would say, with the big companies, in that sense. But still, the AT&Ts are, we now, I'm not sure whether y'all are, but Frontier has bought, you're changing all the time. These people are buying, selling all the time. Now what used to be Verizon, they've exited North Carolina, and now we have what's called Frontier in the areas they were in. And then AT&T is in the same areas. CenturyLink is in about 64 counties in the state. But when county commissioners, go to them and say, we want you to come and do the broadband in these areas. For example, when you're trying to do one-to-one, you will see in a county like Castle and Rockingham County, you'll see the areas where CenturyLink is, and you'll see the areas where kids live that no one is, And the county commissioners can't deal with that. They have to have those areas in a one-to-one. They can't leave all the kids out. And so they ask for them to bid, and the bids that come in, I think, are pretty just not that responsive that they're getting. And so you're getting now some outside of the state programs beginning to come in. and offer less expensive ways to get to some of these areas. But and so it's Tensor. The cable companies are very upset as a result of the latest thing that the Federal Trade Commission recommended that the FCC offer up the white space. You see that came out this week, and the cable companies are all upset about that. And everybody's up in arms. The only issue is it's been out there 20 years. I mean, it's not like it's a new thing. I mean, and I'm not sure where it's going. The only operating pilot in the country is in Wilmington, North Carolina, of the white space. And North Carolina, we're lucky in that our companies, our private sector companies like WRAL, the first HD television station in the country. Here's Wilmington with the first pilot there. I mean, North Carolina has begun to be, just like, sorry guys, but like the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers sent letters out to every state of the eastern part of the United States. And who responded? Dare County, North Carolina, not even connected to the mainland, and said, come, we will help you. And, no, they did. They said, come, we will help you. And they have the Wright brothers, my husband's great uncle, sea captain. He was the boat that brought them over to Dare County. And he then helped them with their engines at night. They would all come and work at night, helping the Wright brothers. And my, Captain Daniels took a picture of the Wright brothers' flight. He'd never seen the camera. And they told him how to use it, and he took that picture that you see. So, I mean, the states always have people that said, oh, what the hell? It's really. Okay.
I'm an Ohio farm boy, so Ohio thanks you. And also Arizona thanks you. You were here, you've been here before, and I've heard you talk again. Arizona started in the early 1990s, about the same as North Carolina did. It was the same groupings and pulling together industries and trying to get things going. Somehow we didn't do it. We couldn't move a ball. And so that's why we're 10 years behind you. And I was sort of thinking about maybe there's another equation, part of the equation we haven't discussed. You ran some numbers, $15 per bit. And you need maybe $50K per kid student, $20K per student. You cap any way you want to on the average. But it comes out $1, $2 per student a month, and we're spending $10,000 a year per student. What about the customers actually ponying up some real money from the school districts, from the state, from the counties, and actually putting some money in the market to make it real for the telecommunications companies to do their job? What about that end of the equation, the actual final use customer?
Well, it's possible. The money that RIAA and ESP got, to give out, actually a lot of that ended up with CenturyLink and with the only one that did not ask for money for any help was AT&T, and it actually went out and did what it thought was right and put fiber in most places, but in most of the rural areas of the rural counties, it really is just basically DSL. And this sounds like really crass, but you probably could go out and dig up the copper and sell it for more than. Yeah, they're all digging it up. I mean, there's a bill in Congress, actually, and I think that's all in Arizona that you have in. Don't you have a bill in right now about copper, about protecting? Yeah, I think you did. I'm going to take that back to North Carolina because literally in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which is the home of the Tar Heels and the basketball team. I live on East Franklin Street, which is the main street, and I was coming down that street, and I kept seeing this guy sitting in front of this house that somebody's putting $1 million into redoing. And he was still out there, night after night, about 6 o'clock. And finally I stopped one day and said, what are you doing out here? They're redoing this house. He said, they've hired me to prevent the copper from being stolen for the fourth time. And until they move in, I'm here every night to make sure it doesn't take off. So copper is really quite expensive. But the fact of the matter is, in the long run, companies will lose if they don't make those investments. Think about that. And you can think about, I remember telling AT&T that what they should do with their switches when they first started the fiber on the Fujitsu switches, that what they should do was utilize the unused space to store data. Anybody heard of data centers? And think about how long ago that was, 1994. I mean, the telephone companies are really need to think a little more outside the box themselves. And not expect, I think, all of us to pony up. I mean, they're doing pretty well if you look at the way they're doing. But and the issue is going to be more and more what's the customer paying. And other companies, I think, in this country will come in if that number doesn't go down. And they'll come in. I mean, there's a lot of investment that has to be done, but it may get cheaper on some of the wireless to serve these customers than what it's being, right now charged. No matter what you want to say, when I talk with someone in Paris, like Michael Coury, who gets like 70 megs down for the equivalent of $30 a month, okay, 70 megs down, then I wonder why we can't do this. We're not we're not dumber than the people in Paris. The people that run our companies aren't dumber. Why can't we do that same thing? And we cannot compete with the world getting up to the 100 gigs, and we really can't. It's going to be a real problem. So I think it is important that every citizen learn about everything they can learn about broadband so that they can be part of the solution. And that's why we've done all this education across our state. I mean, so they learn about this. And now, as I pointed out to you, the county commissioners themselves are passing resolutions saying, I want to put X amount of money into broadband. Let's go out and see who responds and see if we can cover these areas in our county that are not covered. But we need big companies, we need small companies, we need lots of companies out there who are doing this. And no one has the answer for everything. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you very much.
I got a pretty big voice, so don't worry about it.
Alan, you're next on the agenda?
Okay. Well, I have the five that I have is that I had a 5-year-old behind me on the plane last night who picked me 5 times a minute for a couple hours. So I asked briefly just to come in front of you. I just came back from the Rural Healthcare Broadband Summit in D.C. And in the room, basically rural America, the FCC, HHS, ONC, and AT&T. AT&T has representation. Comcast is supposed to, and there was a lot of dialogue around how can we solve the problem of rural America, and some of the issues that Jane brought up were there. And just really in brief, because I know most of you aren't healthcare people, this is the healthcare in America. I just want to emphasize this again. We're moving from a model that has gone from transactional to value-based care. The Obama administration has said basically you have to get across this chasm. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but you're on one side of the chasm right now where you're getting paid for what you do, and I want you to be on the other side of the chasm where you get paid for shared risk for value, and you better figure it out. And so basically business is trying to respond, but we have a number of problems. Specifically, we're going from hospital to clinic, right? We're moving away from hospital, and we're going from what I consider to be heroic medicine to chronic medicine. So, when I was in medical school, nobody goes into, geriatric care, chronic care. Everybody wants to be a flight, sort of, I want to be the astronaut. You want to be the surgeon. Well, that's not where things are going. ACO basically is Accountability Care Organization. That's a very important word to keep in mind because that's how everyone is organized. Rural America, this is their problem, and this was brought up basically by the rural communities. Rural America has a problem with brand. Their local residents do not see them as a viable alternative when they're sick, and what they're left with is the sniffles. So they're left with very low dollar care that they cannot support their own hospitals. And this has to be solved because not only, once that hospital goes away, it's not coming back. You're not going to have health care in rural America, but there's a jobs modifier. And I've emphasized this with everyone before. If you let the rural hospital die, you will lose all those jobs associated with that, and you'll basically have dead towns and a bunch of urbanites. And I don't think that's what any of us want. This is well recognized by rural America. Folks are trying to figure this out. How do we solve this problem? And as I've mentioned, folks, the issue of telemedicine is how do you fix that brand issue? How do you fix it so that a patient walks in and basically They see not only their doctor, but they see someone from the urban setting who wants to manage their care with them. And so how do you fix that brand problem? You're definitely not going to be able to compete with urban America. You have to figure out, how do I have a shared business opportunity between urban and rural where both sides of the equation see this as an attractive value proposition. And telemedicine can solve that. The rural provider really needs to become the doorway to everywhere. They need to figure out, how do we get these urban-rural partnerships to stand up where a patient with, say, cancer, maybe seen rural, come to the city for radiation or surgery, and go back and get infusion and follow imaging, still under the mentorship of urban. This was the proposed model. I presented this to you all before, but I gave this to the group, and I think this was well received. This idea that you need broadband at base. Without broadband, nothing else happens. You've got to figure that out. The application layer and then business and legislative issues are ultimately going to determine what happens in terms of deployment and execution. And so a lot of those are in play right now. The FCC, Linda Oliver and her team were there. You mentioned the $400 million that they put out. The $400 million currently is for connectivity alone. So if you want a piece of that $400 million and you're a rural provider, you want to be rolled up in that, they're happy to help you with that, but it's only for connectivity. One of the things we were pushing on them was perhaps that should be a managed service. You can buy as a subscription not only the broadband, the bits and bytes, but applications that ride along with that. They're kind of thinking about that, but they also recognize that the $400 million is not going to go very far, and how long can they run that supplement out. However, there is a true business opportunity for the broadband providers on top of that. There have been some recent updates, and others, Senator Burns and others, Mike Keeling, have been leading a charge, where we now have a new bill for our state for parity legislation. Basically, that means that whether I see you virtual or in person, I will use the same billing codes. This is a really, really big deal. And if any of you have any influence over the House, the Senate, or the governor, this is a really big deal, because without parity legislation, we can't construct business models that make any sense. They get very convoluted very fast. We need to have some ability to understand that if I'm going to see you for a disease, I can write a business case around that. Currently, it becomes very convoluted based on geography or region, and practitioners basically stop. They just stop thinking about it. They can't do it. They get too many other problems. I presented this to the group with basically the concept that rural providers don't really want to take care of technology. That is not their business. They're not there. You know, they can either find a nerd or rent a nerd, set up their network on their computers. They're hard to find, though. They don't have any rural nerds. And so what they really need is a partnership with somebody who can supply technology as a subscription. I can buy HBO, but I can also buy healthcare. And we can do this today. We just have to start thinking about how that works. The really big problem that I saw, and I mistyped here, is, so there were a couple of things that came out for me that I thought were very interesting. So one of the places to get engaged and figure out the business models, and this was pointed out by the head of the ATA, or the business driver for the ATA, he said, you know, the first people who are going to buy off on this are the CMS-sponsored ACOs, or the Medicare-sponsored ACOs. And we have some of those that sort of look like that, where you have a payer and a provider rolled up under one umbrella, and they win on both sides of the equation. So, for instance, Banner Health, who isn't here, but I think we should probably engage, has both sides of that equation national. So they're both urban and rural and a payer. They have an obvious win here. If you begin to look out and think, who's going to win? So I had a CNO from one of our critical access hospitals. I called her up, pretty visionary. She's actually come to one of these, and she said, find me a grant. I want to do telemedicine. Find me a grant. That is very old school thinking. That's not the right response. The right response is, what is the business model that you want to execute on? And let us help you do that. What, is it cancer care? Is it ED triage? What can we help you with that is sustainable in its own right? The first people to be able to respond to that are the healthcare systems that control who's the payer, provider, urban and rural, the whole thing. So I think we need to look for this. I'm a little tired, so it's make it easy to partner and make it easy to buy. We have to figure out ways to make it easy to buy these services. And currently, although this money is available, I would bet you that if I walked into just about any hospital in this state, and I started talking about how do you purchase a managed service, how do you buy broadband, how do you apply for grants, the CXO who's sitting in front of you is going to just look like they're dumbfounded. They'll have no idea what you're talking about. Broadband, as you pointed out, still remains something that is not in the wheelhouse of healthcare. They're not. That's not their problem. They vaguely know it's good that their computers work. They need someone who basically goes to them and helps them understand. One of the other things, and I'd like to try to stimulate this, is they have these telehealth resource centers the federal government has stood up across the country. I think there's something like 14 of them. And I started thinking about this, and I think we have one here in our state. And I would imagine, I don't know, maybe the ATIC membership can tell me how tightly connected you are to these resources, because they have limited resources. Yet we have several thousand people who are in ATIC who basically make their job translating technology for people around the state. The rural health directors need your help. You need to be able to reach out to them. You need to be able to explain to their constituency what the value of technology is, why they need to deploy it, and why they can save a bunch of money if they do that. I don't think that connection is very tight right now. And so we're relying on state-run organizations with limited resources to get the message out, where we have thousands of consultants. They're all looking for things to do. Get out there. People need your help. They need you to explain how they can save a bunch of money, how they can improve care. There's just not enough resources to effectively get marketing about the opportunity. To me, that was one of the biggest takeaways, was how do you bring together all the different stakeholders? It could be a telco, it could be a care provider, it could be a consultant, who all have a place to play in that ecosystem and spread that message around and get it out there. Because right now, they're all kind of disconnected. And so what you're stuck with are ill-informed rural providers who are struggling with the problem, who could no sooner implement telehealth than they could, become a Mayo Clinic. But it's not going to happen. They need help to do that. We need to show them how. But to me, that was the biggest takeaway from the whole thing. Anyway, I won't say. I know we're running a little bit late.
Basically, on the make it easy to pay, partner make it easy to pay.
Or buy,
I should say. As I've analyzed the problem, and this has crossed many, many different disciplines and many different enterprises, but if we could figure out how to do cost substitution, if we could figure out how to do savings into investment rather than savings into just pure savings, and gain share, and use the gain share then to do investment, we can do a lot of things. And that's the equation that we have to be able to accommodate, is the savings into investment as opposed to savings into savings.
Yeah, so let me give you, I believe we should invest, access, and have them there. One of the tenets that I hold out is that we don't realize this, but in healthcare, we pay ourselves. Dollars that go into the state pay for healthcare in our system. There are use cases today that we are wasting millions of dollars around because we're not thinking about the urban-rural partnerships that we could do. So, just as an example that I might suggest, high-risk OB. Okay? High-risk OB means basically I have a mother living in a rural community who needs neonatal care. If they don't, and they got a 90-minute drive each way to go to the city for the high-risk person to take care of. They don't get the care because they're too far away. They're trying to maintain their job, and guess what happens? They have a premium. And what happens to that premium? Well, that means that you and I get to pay about $2 million in bills because that woman could not get access to care during her pregnancy. That is an example where you'd want someone to walk into a rural hospital, be mentored through her pregnancy by folks in the city, get the highest level of care. When she comes to the city, they already know her case. It's a shared revenue stream, right? Where we end up avoiding those bad outcomes that we end up paying on the back end. There's nothing you're going to do about that. You're just going to That cost is gone. As soon as that kid's born in 30 weeks, just write a check. It's going to be $1 million. And so access may not, we don't like think about things like that, but we end up paying for it on the back end. Those kinds of things are things we could do today. Senior care. It's very hard, as we found out, it's very hard to find SNFs or senior living in some of our rural communities. What's that mean? Well, that means all of our seniors leave when they're too old to stay at home. Well, that means they're away from their loved one, away from their spouse. All sorts of bad things happen. We could bring those together. There's all sorts of costs where, although there is no money, we're paying ourselves for much of it. The total pool of money, we're all paying for it in our own tax. We're just distributing it in ways that are very inefficient. Any other questions? Bill?
Dr. Pitt, we hear about all these implications and all these problems, but I think one of the things that solves problems with the most effectivity is to have a czar of rural health or telehealth or whatever you want to call it. And we don't have an individual like that. You're the
state rural health director.
You're the closest one to it.
Scary picture, Bill.
No, but the point is that somebody like with your capacity and your passion, and you need somebody that goes out and canvasses this 113,000 square miles of the state to get that message across. I think it's keenly important. You can come up with all the problems, but unless you have somebody really directing the cause, it falls flat.
So, Ron, Lori, Allison's group, what's the name of that?
Center for Rural Health
Yeah.
at U of A.
So,
Dr. Neil McKenna.
yeah. So there's a group that's run out of U of A that is absolutely their focus. We've been working with them for the past couple of years, and that's absolutely the group that we've been talking with, along with several different groups trying to come up with strategies. So, Ryan, Lori, do you guys want to talk? Because we've had some internal conversations about some of this, or even Melissa. Not to put you guys on the spot to a meeting that
I'm Lori Mayer. I'm the Medicaid HIT coordinator. So,
I'm glad to see you here, by the way. I'm thrilled to see you here.
Thank you. So I'm from the ONC world. So after managing some funds, federal funds from the Office of National Coordinator for HIT, to try to look at how to retain records and clinical information. So obviously, this whole discussion about broadband availability. And 2 points. ASSET went out and did an environmental scan of healthcare providers in the fall of this year, talking about 19 different organizations, 36 different thought leaders, and broadband insufficiency was one of the leading things that they cited as problems for this implementation. So I would say that I think awareness is raising when it comes to healthcare providers and understand what's going on out there. But I think your point is well taken in that they need to be facilitated to help point them in the way of how to solve this at a local level. And I think that is really where the coordination opportunity really is, as well as then, of course, you have to have the funding and the mechanics to kind of make it all work. So we are talking a lot, again, within the earshot, certainly with the broadband group, to try to figure out how can we marry these two different parts of this problem. There is a center at U of A, as we talked about. They're actually kind of took the lead in organizing some healthcare folks to participate on the broadband call that was last week, notifying healthcare providers about the availability of the funds. I'm not really sure what their next step is, so I'm not sure if U of A is interested in, I guess, Melissa, we've talked about what would be the right way to help facilitate either an application or to help folks kind of put together a model around kind of cooperative purchasing.
Yeah, as has been pointed out, there's $400 million on the table. Kind of, going to go quick.
On the national table, by the way.
On the national table. He who asks for it will get it. You have to be critical access to rural hospitals to basically get some of that money. My sense is that unless they have someone who leads them by the hand to show them how to get this money, we're not going to get it. And so we have a bunch of people, and their job is to basically help, ATIC, a lot of you guys travel the state, I think it is time to put together some collateral and connect the dots where you walk in those facilities and you say, I'm here to help you get a bunch of money. Would you like me to show you how? And this is the first step of many in improving care and reducing your costs.
So if I could just comment to that, so Arizona's been challenged in E-rate funds for years. And so this was part of the conversation we had a couple of years, right? And I think it takes some serious coordination, it takes some serious education. It also takes the right skills and talent to apply for that, because we've seen the skills that have engaged and paid up front for the consulting have been the schools that have benefited from E-rate programs. The schools that try to do it on their own, it fails. And they fail first at being approved for it, and then they fail even worse, which is sadder, I think, at following through and actually getting reimbursed for those funds and leaving money on the table. And so I think it's actually critical. For the problem, again, we come back to one of our key problems is there's no seed money to get this off the ground. And so back to your presentation, Jane, I think there's got to be people that are going to step up and volunteer and help with this, because it's absolutely going to have huge impact to the state. And there's a small window of opportunity here to get this up and running. And so those that are interested, please, let us know, because we're still trying to figure it out. We're having a bunch of meetings around this.
I'm happy. There's a nationalruralcenters.org, and they're basically the ONC's extension for health and technology.
Yep.
They are, they organized this meeting back in D.C. I'm certain that they would be happy to assist in putting that together for others, but I think it does have to be local resources who
Absolutely.
Go out and canvass and help and stay with it.
Arizona Health Connection focus on...
Don't ask me that. You got it right there.
Absolutely. They're actually in the conversation, and
we're engaged in a conversation
Yeah.
about all of this.
However, there's about 4/5 outside of what Healthy Connections do, which is about telemedicine and healthcare. Healthy Connections is about record keeping and processing, unless the year has changed from that. Are you expanded beyond record management and exchange?
Well, Healthy Connections, hi, I'm Melissa Rotella, CEO of Arizona Healthy Connections. Our organization is meant to coordinate health information technology and exchange initiatives. We have grants to help people adopt electronic health records, but we do a lot around connectivity, health information exchange. We've got the telemedicine program on our board. So I think there's a lot of linkages. The question is, who are the right organizations, I think, collectively to lead this, and I think it overlaps in a lot of different areas. The Center for Rural Health, definitely an area that needs to be included. I would like Arizona Healthy Connections to be involved. I don't know who's the best organization to lead the activity, but I think Dr. State, you're right on with in the comment that we really need to have someone who can lead these organizations, and what Aaron said, effectively lead them and have the right skills and expertise to really make this a success, or it's not going to be as well coordinated to be successful in the application process.
Yeah, I would really suggest, by the way, this is a group of gearheads. Basically, if you're in this room, you qualify as a gearhead. But you start with use cases when you talk to people. So if you walk into a CXO's office in a rural health care, blah, 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 give them a use case. You can't talk to them about technology. You got to say, I want to help you with a problem. I think your problem is prenatal care. I think your problem is renal failure. I think your problem is cancer care. I think we can provide shared revenue between your center and your center of excellence where you keep that patient whenever possible. There's a bunch of money. And now I'm going to show you how to do it. If you start with the technology piece, they're going to tune out.
So, Jen's got a comment.
I just one comment to you. I think one of the ways to sell it to the people in rural Arizona is that what's going to happen when the doctors are training now with all of the high-tech stuff you're being trained in? Are they going to want to go to rural areas and to serve patients when they don't have the ability to use those skills and those tools? That's going to be a big issue, is getting them to go out there.
They are well aware. They're losing not only the doctors, they're losing their patients already. They're so far down that road already that they got to figure out how to stop the bleeding.
And I just add one thing, is that we started telemedicine in North Carolina in the 90s, and we did a lot of research on that, and one of the things we found out was that the doctors who are out there and the patients who are out there very much like to talk to the triage doctor, the consulting doctor back at the university hospital from where they live.
That's right.
And the doctor wants to get continuing education for that. With that, they really pushed to get continuing ed for that. As while they were talking to the consulting doctor, and the patient thought they were getting excellent care because they had the consultant talking to them and the doctor at the same time.
One of the goals is you're not stealing rural America's patients. They cannot look at this as you're stealing their patients, because then you're basically saying, give me all your revenue and we'll leave you with nothing. It has to be a partnership where that patient basically stays there whenever possible. They can continue to get imaging. They can get chemo infusions. They can get stuff. It's not a one-way street. It's shared revenue around a patient where both centers win. The urban center gets a constant referral path. The rural center gets to get what they can, though they can provide locally. But this idea that there's a reassurance, a trust factor, that you can get the best care locally, you don't have to travel, is what we need to move towards.
I think the insurance companies pay for it. I mean, if you're in seeing a doctor and you're talking about this.
That's a great question. So,
that's a problem.
Lori and her boss have said for Medicaid, not Medicare, but Medicaid, the doctor and the extender on either side of that can get paid for that transaction. And Mark, Dr. Lee said, please disagree if it's not true. He said, I don't care about geography. I don't care about use case. Virtual or in person, I will pay you the same. And I'll even pay you for the extender who's on the other end. What I won't pay you for is the technology. I will not pay you for telemedicine infrastructure that makes that happen. I will pay you for the care that's delivered. And so in that case, there is no double billing. You're not double billing. In her descriptor, there's lots of different business models where the expert might be willing to engage, knowing that there's downstream revenue based on referral. So if I'm an oncologist, I don't really care about the 5 minutes I spend talking to you about your cancer remotely. What I care about is the bone marrow transplant when you came to the university or to the Center of Excellence. So it depends on how that payment is bundled.
Alan, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Terrific as always.
You got a couple updates, a couple minutes?
Yeah, I got a few minutes here of updates. You now all know that Jane is a force of nature, and so here I am following 10 years behind her. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to get on my skateboard and hitch on the back of her rocket and ride in her draft. Now that's a visual image you'll have to on that skateboard. So, just to give you some updates on things that the Digital Arizona program is doing, we're now ramping up this year's rural outreach efforts. We're going to be creating, over the next few months, 4 regionally located summits. And the focus of those summits is going to be on several issues. One of them is starting to engage regulators and local people in those rural communities at the county level, at the municipal level, and beginning to discuss could they benefit more from the economic development that would make their resources such as faster permitting, lower fees, availability of right-of-way that they may control available? Would that outcome for their community be better than just collecting some fees? We'll see how well that conversation goes, but we also want to start cross-fertilizing all of those communities with one another in that conversation so that we begin to emerge with a set of best practices around those issues. We're also in these summits going to start bringing local healthcare people representing the anchor institutions in those local communities for healthcare, for education, for public safety, and for economic development, so that people who normally don't talk to each other at the local level are in the same room beginning to realize that they have a common problem with broadband adoption and broadband availability and how to get that problem solved. That leads naturally to discussions about demand aggregation, which starts to make attractive ROI presentations to the private sector to expand capacity and build new capacity in those communities. On the speed test, I've been telling you we're going to have the speed test and survey up and running. We ran into some significant technical problems getting it turned up, so we're about a month and a half late. As of this morning, my technical people tell me they finally have it running. We're going to bang against it for about a week, and then we'll start to publish the links. For the Department of Education, We have a landing page, and they're going to be sending out emails to all of the people in the education community throughout the state to go and run this test and take the survey, both at their homes and at their institutions. And then we struck a deal with the lottery where on their homepage they're putting a link to the speed test, and we're giving away an iPad that ATIC has donated to get people incentivized. These are gamblers who come to the lottery website, so we think that they'll be interested in it.
The odds are better.
And right now they're ramping up on a big Powerball number, and the last time they had a big Powerball event, they got, I think it was 2 million hits in a period of about 8 hours, people checking their numbers. If we get 2% of those people going and taking the speed test and filling out the survey, we're going to start to get significantly a massive database base of what people are actually experiencing in terms of their broadband connectivity, as opposed to estimates and statements about what they're getting. So we're really very much looking forward to that. Another issue that we're talking about is Dr. Michael Britt's in the room here. He is heading the broadband public safety work in the state, and he and I are working very closely. Our groups are working very closely to start to try to integrate as much as is reasonable our two programs. If we have to have broadband for public safety in rural areas that are hard to get to down many miles of road, we might as well use the same conduit, the same fiber for public safety as we do for education, as we do for healthcare, as we do for all of these other things. So a key topic in these rural discussions is one network, multiple uses, because that's the way to do it cost effectively instead of building many separate networks. By the way, just a little thing too. I realized when we were talking to a number of people, some people recently at ACA, that people still think T1s are broadband. They don't even rise close to the level of what's defined as broadband. So when people talk about, well, I have a T1, that's old school. That's about 10, 15 years old in terms of the definition of broadband. So we need to start thinking in terms of modern broadband connectivity. I also want to clarify, because I heard that some people are actually thinking that we're planning on building a state fiber network. Not the case. The actual statements in SB 1402 and what we're doing as a program is all about facilitating the private sector making investments in more broadband. So where we can facilitate getting conduit built, that we will do, empty conduit with no fiber in it. And then we will lease that conduit to private sector providers at as close to cost as we can come, such that they now have a better ROI and are more likely to make the investments in building out last mile networks and so-called laterals, or I call them last middle mile connections to get into communities from those conduits that would be going down road. We're also not just talking, and by the way, we're in an early stages of a negotiation with a major company that is committed to building a run eventually from the Mexican border to the Nevada border and going across the bridge into Las Vegas. ADOT's been spectacular in helping us work out the ways to make that happen easily and quickly, and we're well into that process. And this company is particularly happy with the way that that's
on that point, is that the first pilot?
That by declaration, we're calling that the first pilot if it comes into existence. There are also some conversations on the other side of the state with some other companies, but that's really just starting to talk with the capital people and the people who want to invest the dollars to make that happen. So that's a much earlier stage conversation. Let me see, the other one here was, in addition to highways, we've had major railroads show up. They want to start to be in a conversation with us about using their rights-of-way. They believe they can bring all the other railroads in the state into that same conversation. We're having the same thing going on with pipeline companies and power utilities. So it's amazing how this conversation is beginning to spread about the multiple possible ways, sources of rights-of-way, and mechanisms that can be used to actually start to create this build. One of the things we've learned is that the need to get fiber-fed cell towers along highways becomes a major economic driver for investment. And so most people think that like Verizon or AT&T builds the fiber to get to their cell towers. Not so. There are tower companies who do nothing except stand up towers and lease them back to the likes of Verizon and AT&T. And they also usually work with companies like Level 3 and other companies that actually construct the fiber resources to be able to support those towers. But that drive is going to be significant, and the public safety monies that are coming into the state are going to be an important piece of that as well, because the public safety model looks like it's going to require smaller cell towers much closer to each other going down highways to meet the requirements that are evolving in the FirstNet program. By the way, Dr. Britt tells me that yesterday he got the first guidance from the Fed on what the public safety planning activities need to look like. His cell phone's been burning a hole in his pocket from the number of people trying to call and find out what the status of that is. But that's becoming a really, really hot prospect. And Michael, how much is that money for the planning?
$2.98 million.
I call that $3 million. Good. Very good. So I think that's about it. Any questions on where we're at? Great. Thanks.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Michael. Jeff, when's the next meeting? Is it on here?
Yeah, May 9th.
Thank you. Perfect. January. Any other questions, comments?
You might want to mention that the ASIC is pushing the telemedicine parity bill, and people should register with A-List if they want to speak down here. Mike, do you want to say any more about that?
This last week, we did drop the Senate Bill 1353 for telemedicine parity, and in the Senate, SB 1353, and it will go to the Health and Human Services Committee as the first committee, and then the Rules Committee.
Yeah, start to see a really good meeting.
Currently, it's scheduled.
According to the legislative sponsor.
I just wanted to let Jane know that there is a graduate in the room of the Indiana University, the #1 basketball team in the nation. I think you maybe is number 7.
All right. So with that,